on day one after the storm. Those folks in Pinellas County with whom I was just speaking, so say tomorrow, what can FEMA do to help the residents there?
Well, FEMA has actually been pretty involved for the last few days, pre-positioning teams and equipment and commodities in various locations. And what they typically have done over the last 48 hours is move those teams to Maxwell Air Force Base, positions in Orlando, positions in Atlanta. They have people in Columbia, for example. They don't want to be in the path of the storm, but they want to be able to move in very quickly after the fact to support the governor and the state of Florida's efforts to help manage this disaster. And, response is really a team sport. All disasters are locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. And FEMA's there to come in and help those states overcome gaps or take on missions that the state or local governments don't have the capacity to do at this point.
What about residents who've lost everything or certainly returning or not be able to return to uninhabitable homes? I mean, how quickly can they get housing? How do they go about getting that?
Housing doesn't come very quickly in the terms of manufactured homes from FEMA and those types of things. What will typically happen is that, a disaster declaration would be put in place by the President of the United States, which would include individual assistance, which would help to offset some of the initial costs that disaster victims are experiencing. But the goal would be, how do we make the home safe, sanitary, and functional, right? And try to keep people where they are. If the home is obliterated and gone, most likely they're with friends or family or in a county shelter, which is not ideal. And so you want to eventually turn on transitional shelter assistance, which would allow FEMA and the state to be able to move and mobilize people to local hotels or rental vacancies, areas where there's rental vacancies, to get them in a more suitable, stable situation. The long-term housing may not come for months. Mm-hmm. The number of trailers, for example, just don't exist. Right. They have to be bought or mobilized or brought into the community, and it takes some time.
Can I ask you about rebuilding, though? Does FEMA encourage or require residents to rebuild homes that could withstand future storms, or do they suggest relocating altogether? I mean, to what extent does FEMA get involved with that when people say, hey, look, what are we going to do? What kind of advice can you give us?
This is a conversation that needs to be had with Congress, the insurance industry, emergency managers, and local and state leaders. The bottom line is that as a nation, we need to wake up and realize that we have to do more when it comes to proper land use planning, passing proper building codes, and a lot of people don't like that, but they work. Anything, for example, that's been built after the 2001 Florida Building Code typically survives these types of events, and anything before that really doesn't fare very well if you're in the path of these hurricanes. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of land use planning, more building codes, and proper insurance. And, there is a big debate where insurance companies may be pulling out of parts of Florida or California, but we've got to get them back to the table, because the insurance piece is really the first line of defense for the citizens that go through these things. And when they pay into a system, it should be there for them in times like this. So it's a combination of things that have to be happening. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy. We're allowing too many people to live in vulnerable areas and without building properly. I mean, we put people on the moon. We can build correctly for the future of disasters.
Brock, it's almost as if you were eavesdropping to a conversation I was having here outside the studio earlier, and it's regarding specifically flood insurance and the question about access to obtaining that for homes that are in vulnerable areas. It still remains a huge issue. Does FEMA, does the federal government have an official position on that? You say you want to get insurance companies back to the table.
Yeah, sure. The NFIP, FEMA is forced to run a program that's not financially solvent. The bottom line is that FEMA cannot charge an actuarial rate, does not have enough money coming in from premiums to be able to pay out the claims that typically occur. And the NFIP continues to go bankrupt because Congress doesn't fix it. It goes bankrupt after major events where major flooding events take place. Honestly, one of the things that's got to change is we've got to stop focusing on a flood map, whether you're in a map or outside of a map, because what I've learned in my career and what most emergency managers will tell you, any house can flood regardless of where it is. For example, a basketball shoved in a drain, can change the flood zone of a neighborhood, or large commercial construction that's not incorporated into the map can change the floodplain, and the maps can't keep up. So, we've got to stop talking people out of flood insurance because they're not shown in a flood map, and we need to start pushing forward the campaign that any house can flood and everyone should consider it. The more policies you have, the more, nationwide, the more stable the program comes and its ability to pay out when needed. And so there's some simple fixes, in my opinion. We're just not having the conversation and can't get the ball rolling from a FEMA perspective to fix the NFIP.
Well, I'm really glad we had this conversation, Brock. I know we focus mostly on those folks who need immediate assistance from FEMA, but you're right, that bigger picture conversation is extremely vital going forward. Thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Back with me right now.
Thanks for having me on.
Yep. NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman.